We'll pick up with session 2 of Corrie ten Boom. It was 1941, a year after the invasion, and Germany now ruled Holland with cruel force. The German occupation had not started this way, of course. At first, the rules didn't seem too bad. The soldiers made the people of Haarlem follow a curfew. This meant everyone had to be inside before a certain time every night. If anyone was caught in the streets after curfew, that person could be taken to jail. But soon the German rules became more unfair. The soldiers told everyone they had to carry an identity card with special markings. They also made the people use ration cards to buy food and other things they needed. The only way to eat and buy supplies was to use the ration cards from the German soldiers. It was hard to live this way. Corrie hated how the Germans controlled everything, but she thanked God that the Germans were not hurting people as long as they followed the rules. But as time went by, the German rules became even more harsh. Now they banned every house radio. And I'm going to change books for just a minute and read out of this book. Early in the occupation, our town was ordered to turn in all radios. Since it would look strange if our household produced no radio, my nephew Peter suggested we turn in the portable and hide the larger, more powerful instrument. He installed the radio beneath a curve in the stairs just above Father's room and replaced the old boards while I carried the smaller one down to where the radio collection was being made. "Is this the only radio you own?" asked the army clerk. I had known from childhood that the heavens rained fire upon liars, but I met his gaze. "Yes," I said. I walked out of the building and began to tremble. For the first time in my life, I had told a conscious lie, and it had been so easy. But we had saved our radio. Every night, one of us would remove the stair tread and crouch over the radio, the volume barely audible. Then one of us would thump the piano in Tanty Jan's room as hard as we could, trying to cover up and drown out the sound of the radio. We listened to the news from England this way. The German offensive was everywhere victorious for the first year and a half. Month after month, the Free Dutch broadcasts could only urge us to wait, to have courage, to believe in the counteroffensive which must surely someday be mounted. Worry crept into Corrie's mind as she listened to this Free Dutch broadcast. I could be sent to jail if the Germans ever found out. She turned up the radio slightly. To her dismay, the news of the outside world always seemed grim. The Germans were attacking many other nations and they were winning. Now they wanted to take over Europe. England, one of the last safe places in Europe. Scared, Corrie prayed for an end to the war. "Lord, please send someone to stop the Germans soon." But Corrie's loss of freedom under the occupation was not the worst thing about the Germans' war. It was the ideas of the German leader Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party that troubled Corrie more than anything else. These Nazi Germans believed that they were the pure race. They thought that people with white skin and good health were the best, and everyone else was weak and worthless. The elderly, the mentally retarded, those were all targeted for their evil. Many people in Holland fit into the Nazis' idea of a pure race, but the Jewish people also did not fit. In Germany, Hitler blamed the Jews for all of their country's troubles. Now the Germans wanted to convince everyone that the Jews were the problem for Holland too, a problem that they should get rid of. To Corrie's horror, as the Germans stayed longer in her country, their message of hatred toward Jews began to spread. Many of her neighbors began to believe the same thing. How, Corrie wondered, could people believe this message of hatred toward the Jews, God's chosen people? A Dutch group called the National Socialist Bond, or NSB, started to support the Nazis and their ideas about Jews. The NSB became more powerful as many people in Holland decided to join them. Some joined because they had got extra benefits of extra food or a better job or bigger houses, but many joined because they believed the Nazis were right. Each day, as Corey and Father took their daily walk around the city, Corey was sad to see how the sickness of the Nazis' hatred was spreading. The Germans and the NSB were cruel. The Jews were treated like animals. All Jewish men, women, and children had to wear a yellow six-pointed star on their clothes. Each star had the word Jude written in black ink at the center. I had another picture of that as well. With this visible reminder, the Jews were an easy target for all who agreed with the German Nazi way of thinking. Signs soon began popping up in shop windows, and the sign looked something like this. Just a minute. I bet if you're like me, you can't read that sign, but it says, "Jews will not be served." Parks, libraries, restaurants, and theaters all echoed the same tune with a "no Jews" policy. Where were the Jews supposed to go? Corey shook her head in anger and sadness. These places where she had often gone as a girl were now dark reminders of the evil changes in her city. Then the Jews began to disappear without a trace. Watches repaired and hung in the back of the shop, waiting for their owner, and Corey never knew whether the Gestapo took their owner or if they escaped Holland for somewhere safer. Corey was so worried for them. Let me change books just a minute. So, talking about the oppression of the Jews. On a drizzly November morning, a year and a half after the invasion, I stepped outside to fold back the shutters. I saw 4 German soldiers coming down the street, combat helmets low over their ears, rifles strapped to their shoulders. I shrank back and watched. At Wiles Furrier's, directly across the street, the group stopped. One of the soldiers unstrapped his gun and with the butt of the gun banged on the door. The door opened and all 4 soldiers pushed inside. I dashed back through our shop and up to the dining room. "Betsy, hurry! Something awful is happening at Wiles." We reached the front door in time to see Mr. Weil backing out of his shop with the muzzle of a gun pressed against his stomach. The soldier left him on the sidewalk, went back into the store, and slammed the door. We could hear glass breaking inside. Soldiers began carrying out armloads of fur coats. A crowd was gathering in spite of the early hour. Mr. Weil had not moved from his spot on the sidewalk. A window over his head opened and a shower of clothes rained down on him. Pajamas, shirts, underclothes. Slowly, the old furrier began to gather up his clothing. Betsy and I ran across the street to help him. "Your wife," Betsy whispered. "Where is Mrs. Weil?" The man blinked at her. "You must come inside," I said, snatching socks and handkerchiefs from the sidewalk. We propelled the bewildered man across to the Beiji. In the dining room, Father greeted Mr. Weil without the slightest sign of surprise, and his natural manner seemed to relax the old man a bit. His wife, he said, was visiting her sister in Amsterdam. "We must warn her to not come home," Betsy said. Where were the Wiles to live? Father and Betsy and I exchanged glances. Willem. Someone had to go talk to Willem. We couldn't call him because our telephone had been disconnected early in the occupation, so I went by train. When I reached their home, Willem was not there, but his wife and son were. I told them what had happened. "Tell Mr. Weil to be ready as soon as it's dark," their son Kik said. At nearly 9 p.m., our new curfew hour, Kik rapped at the alley door. Tucking Mr. Weil's clothing bundle beneath his arm, he led the man away into the night. 2 weeks later, I saw Kik and asked him what had happened. He smiled at me, the broad, slow smile I had loved since he was a child. If you're going to work with the underground, Tanty Corey, you must learn not to ask questions. Kick's words went round and round in my head. If you're going to work with the underground. Was Kick working with this secret and illegal group? Was Willem? We suspected, of course, that there was an underground in Holland. Rumors abounded. The stories always featured things we believed were wrong in the sight of God. Stealing, lying, even murder. Was this what God wanted in times like these? How should a Christian act when evil was in power? Father now housed in Tanty Jan's big mahogany bookcases a large collection of Jewish theology belonging to the rabbi of Haarlem. He had brought them to Father more than a year before. Just in case I shall not be able to care for them, he had said. He had waved apologetically at the procession of small boys behind him, each staggering under the weight of several huge volumes. Books do not age as you and I do, old friend, the rabbi had said. They will speak when we are gone to generations we will never see. The books must survive. And the rabbi had been one of the first to vanish from Haarlem. And then one day, Corey saw anxious and let's see. One day, Corey and Father arrived at the market. Corey saw an awful scene unfolding. In front of her, the Nazi soldiers surrounded the marketplace, blocking them from going inside. A pale-faced Corey clutched her chest weakly as she realized what the soldiers were doing. They shoved men, women, and children into the back of a waiting truck. As the truck rumbled to life, Corey saw that all of the prisoners wore that yellow star. Oh, Lord, Corey thought, how could this happen? And later she would find out that they had been taken to concentration camps. Those poor people, Corey whispered, watching helplessly as the truck sped away. Her heart sank as she thought of their fates, how she wanted to do something, but what? Helping Jews was just as much of a crime as being a Jew. Besides, Corey reasoned, she was just a poor, middle-aged woman. How could she save the Jews from the enemy's hands? Maybe she was not able, but her Savior certainly was. Corey bowed her head as she realized what she must do. And this was her prayer. Lord Jesus, I offer myself for your people in any way, any place, any time. Rather than stop it, I'm just going to keep going, but I have to make sure where I'm going with it. Okay. A timid knock rattled the Beiji's alley door on a mild May night in 1942. Corey, who was sitting with Father and Betsy in their dining room, glanced out the window. She was surprised to see a woman heavily clothed, here it is May, holding a suitcase standing there. She hurried down to the door and opened it. May I come in? The woman asked in a shaky voice. Of course, Corey replied warmly, stepping aside. Her heart swelled with compassion as she watched the woman shuffle quickly through the door. Her face was pale and her whole body shook with fear. After meeting Father and Betsy, the woman told them her story. My name is Mrs. Clearmaker. I'm a Jew and a shopkeeper, she explained. The police arrested my husband. My son went into hiding. Yesterday, the police came and told me I had to close my store. I'm too afraid to go back. And I heard that you helped a man on the street before, a Jew like me. This was true. After Corey decided to do something to help, she and her family took in Jews and hid them from the Germans. Then they would get the Jews to a safer place out of the city in the country In this way, the 10 booms could keep as many Jews in Harlem as possible from being taken by the soldiers. Father smiled at Mrs. Clearmaker and offered a polite bow. "God's people are always welcome here," said Father. "Yes," added Betsy enthusiastically, "we have plenty of room. We're so glad to have you." Mrs. Clearmaker sniffled as tears of relief trickled down her cheek. Betsy placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and showed her where she could sleep. Over the next few weeks, a steady stream of desperate Jews, just like Mrs. Clearmaker, came to the 10 booms for help. Each day brought new faces to the door, and each day Corey ushered them into the warmth of their home. Betsy would wait on them, feeding them. Father would comfort and talk with them, and Corey would find a safe place out of Harlem for them to go to. The next day, I made the trip to Willem's. "Willem," I said, "we have 3 Jews staying right at the BG. Can you get places for them in the country?" "It's getting harder," Willem said. There's a picture of Mrs. Clearmaker, by the way. And the reason she was so heavily clothed was these people would put on as many clothes as they could put on and then pack what they could in a small suitcase so that they had some things with them. "It's getting harder," Willem said. "They're feeling the food shortage even out on the farms. I still have addresses, but they won't take anyone without a ration card." "But Jews aren't issued ration cards," I said. Willem continued, "I know, and ration cards cannot be counterfeited. They're changed too often, and they're too easy to spot. Identity cards are different. I know several printers who do them. Of course, you need a photographer." A photographer? Printers? What was Willem talking about? "Willem, if people need ration cards and there aren't any counterfeit ones, what do you do?" Willem gestured vaguely. "Steal them." I stared at this pastor. "Then, Willem, could you steal, could you get 3 stolen cards?" "No, Corey. Every move I make is watched." He put an arm around my shoulder. "It will be far better for you to develop your own sources. The less connection with me, the better. The less connection with anyone else, the better." On the train ride home, I turned Willem's words over in my mind. Your own sources? That sounded so professional. How was I going to find a source of stolen ration cards? Who in the world did I know? And then a name appeared in my mind. Fred was the man who used to read the electric meter at the BG. Now Fred had a job working for the food office. Wasn't it in the department where ration books were issued? That evening after supper, I rode my bike to Fred's door. Fred came to the door and stared at me blankly when I said I wanted to talk to him about our Sunday morning service, so they attended church together. He invited me in, closed the door, and said, "Now what did you really come to see me about?" "Lord," I prayed silently, "if it is not safe to confide in Fred, stop this conversation now before it is too late." We've had some unexpected company at the BG. First it was a single woman, then a couple, and when I got back this afternoon, another couple. I paused for an instant. "They're Jews." Fred's expression didn't change. I continued, "We can find safe places for them, but they must provide something too. They must provide a ration card." Fred's eyes smiled. "Now I know why you came here." "Is there any way you can give out extra cards more than you report?" "No, Corey. Those cards have to be accounted for a dozen ways. They are checked and double checked." And here's a picture of the ration cards. The hope in me began to tumble, but Fred was frowning. "Unless," he began, "unless there was a holdup, a robbery. The food office in another town was robbed last month, but the men were caught." He was silent a while. If it happened at noon, he said slowly, when just the other clerk and I are there, and if the others came in and found us tied up and gagged, he snapped his fingers. I know just the man who might do it. How many do you need? I opened my mouth to say 5, but the number that astonishingly came out of my mouth was 100. When Fred opened the door to me just a week later, I gasped at the sight of him. Both eyes were a greenish purple and his lower lip was cut and swollen. My friend took very naturally to the part of being a robber, was all he would say. On the table, in a brown manila envelope, were 100 ration cards. And Fred had already torn the continuing coupon from off the top. This was the last coupon that was presented at the food office on the last day of each month to get your next month's card. With these coupons, Fred could continue to issue us 100 cards every month. Develop your own sources, Willem had said. We were friends with half of Harlem. We knew someone in every business and service in the city. We did not know the political views of all these people, but God did. My job was simply to follow his leading, holding every decision up to him in prayer. I knew I was not clever or sophisticated. If the Beijing was becoming a meeting place for need and supply, it was through some strategy far higher than my own. God used the watch shop as a great way to hide Jews and then help them move on to safety. Because the shop had a lot of business, Corrie could easily get people into and out of her house without the Gestapo seeing. Corrie's nephew, Peter, also came up with clever codes to talk about hiding Jews. And this is a picture of actual ration cards. The other was just a drawing, but this is a photograph of the ration cards. Peter said, "Don't say I have 2 Jews that need a place to hide. Say this instead. I have 2 watches that need to be sent away. Then, if someone overhears you talking, someone in the shop, it will just sound like you're talking about the shop." Peter's idea was perfect. Just as with all our needs, the Lord provided an answer. Let's see, I'm sorry, I skipped something there. What I skipped, they had several different ways of talking about the Jews. Like I said, I have 2 watches that need to be sent away. I have a watch that cannot be repaired. I need a receipt for it. That means a Jew has died in hiding, and they need a place, a way to bury that. So I'm going to stop there and then pick it up next session.